All right, all right, all right. Fantastic job to these kids who helped lead us in singing. Let's give them one more big round of applause. Big thanks to our coffee kids, our greeter kids, our tech kids, all the kids that helped out with the service. You guys did an amazing job. You guys feel amazing? You look amazing. You look marvelous today. I want you to know that. And I'm so glad that you're in the service because every single one of you matters to God. Every single one of you matters to God. You guys feel like you matter to God? These kids matter to God? Come on. You do. You're important to the church. Can you guys see yourself on the screen? Watch this. If I do this, it happens on the screen. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, you see me up there? Yeah. Am I looking as good to you as I am to me? That's good. All right. So we're going to go ahead and have you guys turn around here, stand up, and face this way. Okay? Help me out here. Can you help me with my first sermon illustration here this morning? Good, good. Love to hear that. All right. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to have you number off 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you help me with that? So we'll start over here. 1, 2. There we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so here's what I want to see happen is everybody who has the number 2, sit down. If you got a 2, sit down. 2, sit down. That's good. That worked out conveniently. Front row sat down. Okay. And if the national statistics are correct, and these kids represent all of the kids who go to church on a Sunday morning, if the national statistics are correct, then when we go to college, when these kids go to college, the kids who are sitting down will not have their faith stick. In other words, they'll stop attending church, they'll stop being connected in a student ministry, and they'll just go off on a spiritual drift for a while. And I don't know about you, but when I think about that statistic, it breaks my heart. Breaks my heart, 50% of kids. And when I see it in like the real lives of real kids' faces right in front of me, it breaks my heart even more to think that that's the case. Now, at Christ Community Church, we want to do everything that we can to develop a dynamic kids ministry that breaks all of the odds of the national statistics. We want to be sure that every single kid, because every kid matters to God, has the best opportunity possible to grow up and have a sticky faith. So all you do is go ahead and stand up. The dream scenario is that when kids get through our kids ministry and our high school ministry and wind up going to college, that every single kid sticks, because every kid matters to God. Amen? All right. But don't clap yet, because it gets even bigger than this. Because the dream is not just that these kids would stick. We believe as these kids as not only the church of the future, but they're the church of now. That these kids are significant to God. These guys are pint-sized missionaries, and they all have significant relationships and ability to make invitations so that they can bring other people into the kingdom of God even when they're this age as they represent Jesus out into the world. So they can reach out to all of their friends who are sitting over there and say, come on guys, come on over, come be a part, come into the family of God. And as time goes by, more and more kids join. And so the real deal is that this is an ever-growing number of kids in the next generation. Amen? Now you can clap. Now you can clap, because this is what the dream looks like. You guys did an awesome job being my opening illustration. Go ahead and roll on back. You did awesome. Woo! Let's give them one more hand. Love those kids. I love seeing them all around the church all morning long. It's a total blast. And, you know, I remember some episodes of being a kid. You guys remember some of the carefree kid days? I remember being 12 years old. The year was 1980. And if my economics were going well, you know, if I had done a good paper route or had a little bit of money going on a Saturday, I would wind up at the roller rink. You guys remember the roller rink? And there are certain songs that just kind of in a throbbing way come to mind as I think about my days at the roller rink. Here's one. Do-do-doom, doom, doom, do-doom, doom, doom, do-doom, do-do-doom. Any other children of the 80s know that song? Yeah, Another One Bites the Dust. What a terrible song to be playing at a roller rink for kids. I look back on that, you know, I was totally dancing to it at the time. I listen to the lyrics now, I'm like, that is awful stuff. I also remember kind of hanging like this over the edge of the roller rink wall during certain kinds of skates, because there are like certain brands of skates that were out there. And I was the guy standing on the wall every time it was time for the couple skate. Yeah, all the other adorable kids out side by side with their hands held, and me just sitting by the wall. And it wasn't that I had a problem asking girls. I was a very verbal child, as you can imagine. I would ask them. I just had a problem getting them to say yes. So there I sat by the wall, and as I sat there, I was waiting for the light to change, because back then there was a kind of a little blinker light that was behind couples skate, and I always wanted to wait for it to change to what? Change to all skate. Yeah, all skate. Because at that time, everybody who was hanging on the wall got to come off the wall and hang out and be in the rink together. Now, these next few days, we're talking about the next generation. We're doing a 3-week series on the next generation. In fact, this week is Kids Take Over. Next week is Mother's Day. The week after that is Student Takeover. So these 3 weeks, for the first time in 10 years, we're going to be spending 3 weeks focusing in on the next generation. And I want you to know that this message series is an all skate. It's everybody in. Whether you're a student or a parent or you're a single or you're a senior, it doesn't matter. Everybody has a significant role to play in the lives of our kids and in the lives of our students. So I want you to pay careful attention no matter where you're at in your life stage, because the truth of the matter is that none of us, when we entered into this dream, none of you when you explored coming to faith in Jesus, none of you when you said, I'm going to throw my weight behind being a part of a local church, nobody said to themselves, I'm really kind of hoping that everything stays the same, we don't have any young people, we don't reach any new people, and we just grow old and die together. Right? Everybody's dreaming about the next generation having more strength and more power than our generation. The dream is that we set up our kids to be better off than we were, that they stand on our shoulders and they're able to reach higher heights for the sake of the kingdom than we were ever able to reach ourselves. And this is why we invest in them so much. This is why at Christ Community Church we invest a disproportionate amount of resources into our kids. This is why we have staff that are specialists in certain age ranges and know the developmental abilities in that age range and focus on helping the kids to grow for the age that they're at. This is why hundreds of volunteers pour themselves out every single week in order to be able to invest in the lives of kids, because we believe this emerging generation matters. That when we have kids ministry on Sunday morning or Wednesday night, we don't have childcare. You want to get our staff members really, really mad? Call our kids ministry childcare. Because we're not just putting kids in a corner so the adults can worship. We've got a ministry because those kids matter in and of themselves. It's a kids ministry, and it's reflective of priorities that we see in the scriptures. So we're going to be turning to Psalm chapter 78 next, Psalm 78. So if you've got your Bible, turn it on, because I know that's how you roll. And we're going to be reading from Psalm 78 beginning at verse 4 and paying attention to what it has to say about generations together. It says, we will not hide them, that's the powerful, amazing truths of God. We will not hide them from their descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done. He decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children. So the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. That they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commands. Asaph was the psalmist who wrote this psalm, and it was 1,000 years before Jesus. And even way back then, they said, we need to bring these spiritual truths deeply into the lives of the next generation so that they can worship God the same as we did, so they can pass it on to the next generation after that. And of all these verses, you know what my favorite one is in Psalm chapter 78? It's this one here. It's verse 6. It says, so the next generation would know them, and then get this, even the children yet to be born. The psalmist isn't just thinking about his own kids, he's thinking about the generation after his own kids that haven't even been born yet. But it gets better than that, because he's thinking about the generation beyond them, that even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. This is a 4-generation psalmist. He's thinking about myself, my kids, their kids who have not yet been born yet. I think I said yet too many times. And then the generation that are beyond them that they will tell. He's creating a culture that will last for multiple generations, even beyond his death. It's the 4-generation principle. And we dream of what our lives will be. We dream of what will make us significant in this world. Have you ever taken some time to just sit back and think about that 4th-generation principle? Well, what's going to be here 2 generations, say 50, 60 years after you're dead? Well, what's going to be here is your kids and their kids as they grew up, your spiritual children and their spiritual children as they grew up, and in a macro level, churches that you're a part of and that you plant, and the churches that they plant and the ways that they grow up. That's what's going to be around 50 years after you die. And so we need to be thinking about, for significance for this world and for the sake of the kingdom, how do we invest in those future generations to be able to carry the torch for a long, long time? So we invest in the next generation so they can thrive. And we think about his goodness and we tell about his goodness so that the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children, the 4-generation principle. Now, it's not just Psalm chapter 78. Psalm 145 also speaks deeply about generational investment, and particularly the verbal side of generational investment. Check this out. Come on, baby. Can you take control from the booth, Travis? Is that possible? I think I got a dead battery. There we go. Here we go. Okay, so great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. And I'll pause there for just a second, because I don't know if you've ever sat and thought about the greatness of the Lord. I mean, if you want to have a mind-numbing quiet time sometime, just say, I'm going to sit for a while and try and imagine how big God is. I mean, imagine how big infinity is and then multiply it by infinity. That's how big God is. Imagine the God who is before and beyond the expanse of the universe, the God who invented the very idea of time, and then think about how long he's been around. You want to blow your mind, think about the greatness of God. And then he talks about how we communicate the greatness of God to the next generation. Verse 4 says, one generation commends your works to another. They will tell of your mighty acts. They speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty, and I will meditate on your wonderful works. They tell of the power of your awesome works, and I will proclaim your great deeds. They celebrate your abundant goodness and joyfully sing of your righteousness. Did you notice all of the telling words that are in there? Words like speak and proclaim and tell and commend and celebrate and joyfully sing. The idea behind this is the idea behind Kids Takeover, is that one generation speaks to another, sings to another, talks to another. We're living out Psalm 145 together. But my favorite verse of all of this is verse 4. It says, one generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. And the reason I like this verse in particular is it doesn't say which generation. You would assume that perhaps it would be the older generation speaking to the younger generation about God's good acts, but it doesn't say. And I got to tell you, I love when I see good things coming from the younger generations. In fact, at my age, oftentimes what I'm most inspired by is when I see faith erupting in the lives of kids. When a little kid invites a friend to church for the very first time, or when a teenager shares his or her faith, or when a young person preaches their very first sermon and leads somebody to faith in Jesus, or when you get to see people joyfully singing together. And I know even here this morning in the worship center, it was a blast to see all of the kids on stage, but I was sitting over in the corner of the worship center looking right up there at what I think is the Bellevue group. You guys up there? Alyssa and everybody? Yeah, let's see you guys up there waving. They were dancing and singing along with. They were like an inspiration to me. And I love seeing the kids that are involved. It's inspiring to my faith. One generation commends your works to another. And the reason is, or the idea on this is that kids can speak into the lives of adults and inspire their faith just as much. I love hearing a little kid tell their story about how God has been at work in changing their life. And we thought this morning you might like to hear from one of those little kids. This is Johanna Ward.
Hello, my name is Johanna Ward. I am 8 years old and I go to Reeder Elementary and I'm in 2nd grade. I was born in Kampala, Uganda, Africa. When I was about 3 years old, my dad died and I never got to see my mom because she was always at work. So I got to stay with my aunt. We didn't have that much, so we were poor and we had like a little bit of clothes and we would always have to look for food because we didn't have any food. And I remember that I would always wait by the road and I would wait for chickens to get run over and I would bring them and that would be my dinner. My aunt wanted me to be happy. She always had to go to work and she couldn't take care of me because she was at work. So she wanted me to have a family that would be with me. I was scared because I thought I was getting taken away from my aunt. In October 2012, I met my new family for the first time, and a few months later, I officially got adopted. After I got used to it, I started to do preschool. I started to learn how to say the ABCDs to Z. It was exciting going to school for me because I went to school, but we didn't learn much, and I got to learn more and more. My new family is fun and exciting. They really love me and they spend time with me. When I first started to go to church, I had no idea. I didn't know God. I went into the Kids Connect and I started to learn more about God. I like that there's a lot of getting to be together and spending time with each other, learn each other's names. I like that we get to have parties sometimes and we get to learn more about God and spread it on. And that's what I love about Kids Connect. Jesus had this amazing plan for me, and he said that he wanted me to come to America to learn more, to be with a new family. And I'm glad for what Jesus did for me. The best things about being adopted is they give you a little stuffed animal. And sometimes you get to have ice cream afterwards. And I had a new family. I'm thankful for my new family, this big, awesome church and Kids Connect, and I'm thankful for that God sent me here.
So Johanna is one of those kids that just matters to God. And so does Carter, and so does Bowen, and so does Megan, and Rachel, and Joshua, and Caleb, and all of the little kids that run around here from week to week. And so do kids that have not yet been born, and so do kids that do not currently attend our church. They all matter to God. So we want to do our very best to be reaching out to them, to doing everything it takes to reach them. I think of Doug and Aaron Ward, the parents of Johanna, and how they said, we will stop at nothing. We will go to the other side of the planet in order to be able to help one little girl move out of the tough situation that she's in and experience all of the blessings of a new family, a biological family and a church family that are working together in order to invest in this little girl's life. And I think about how much they're like Jesus, who said, I'll stop at nothing. I'll even leave the throne room of heaven in order to come to planet Earth and become a human being, because there are so many people who have names, people who matter to me, people who I love deeply and I want to have come into my family. And so Jesus comes and he invites us in to be a part of his family. If this is what Jesus did and we're trying to be like Jesus, then we need to be passionate about reaching one more again as well. So let's just take a look at the odds for our students one more time, similar to the illustration I had this morning, but just a little bit expanded here. These odds, by the way, come from a couple of great researchers. Their names are Dr. Kara Powell and Dr. Chap Clark, who wrote this book called Sticky Faith. It's been a very, very helpful book where they've taken a look at what are the factors that seem to make the biggest difference in kids having a faith that's sticky. And these are available out in the resource booth if anybody wants to get their hands on one of those. But one of the things that you'll find in this book is that they say, okay, here's the first thing we illustrated. When a kid goes to college, about 50% of them stay actively involved in their faith. Their faith sticks, and about 50% of them become disconnected with the church and with Christian fellowship and so forth. And if you split out this don't stick group into two categories, you've got kids who didn't plan to leave their faith. They were feeling pretty good about their faith when they went to college, but for some reason they just drifted. And then you've got kids who actually planned to not be involved in their faith when they went. They said, hey, when I go to college, I'm breaking free from my chains and I'm getting away from this. And now I have a special passion for this group. This was me when I went to college. And I want to see as few people as possible in that group. Another way to look at the statistics is that 50% stick, and some of them do come back. I mean, the truth is some people wander during their college days. They don't forget about God. They just become disconnected and later come back in, return to the faith. That's about half of the people who don't stick in college. But there's still this quarter section that leave and they never come back. And friends, I have a passion to minimize so that as few people as possible wind up in that never return category and as many people as possible wind up sticking at Christ Community Church. So Dr. Powell and Dr. Clark got together and they said, let's look at the factors that influence whether or not a kid's faith sticks or not. Okay, whether a kid's faith sticks or not. We'll go take a look at those factors. And they tried to find out what's the magic bullet. Like, for example, does somebody who has a professional youth pastor have a better chance of their faith sticking than someone who doesn't? Or maybe somebody who goes on a missions trip will have a better chance of their faith sticking than someone who doesn't. And as they looked for this magic bullet, you know what they found out? There is no magic bullet. But there are certain factors that correlate with students whose faith is sticky, and these are some of the factors that they found. Key factor number one was influencing relationships. Influencing relationships. And they looked at a number of different categories. See if you can guess which one of these categories was the most important category. Friends in my youth group, friends outside of my youth group leaders, my parents, or other adults in the congregation. What do you think was the most influential group? Parents, by a long shot. Parents were by far the most important influencers. And I want to let you know, if you're someone who is a parent of a kid, it's never too early to start influencing them spiritually, and it's never too late to start influencing them spiritually. The things that you do, the way that you live, has a very important effect on your kids as they're growing up. And next week, we're going to be talking about spiritual parenting. We'll have Nancy Davies, who's one of our great staff here, who's a child development expert. And she and I are going to be unpacking some factors of spiritual parenting. So be sure you're here for that. We'll be focusing on that next week. Second key factor is worship with adults. That kids who had worship experiences regularly with adults in the main congregation that got to see their parents worship and see worship modeled by other adults were far more likely to be sticky than kids who weren't worshiping with adults. Third factor, 5-to-1 ratio. Now, if you were ever to go to college and study youth ministry, one of the things that they would teach you is that in a good youth group, you need to have one adult for every 5 students, okay? One adult for every 5 students. So it looks like this. One adult for 5 students. That way you can have an appropriate span of care and invest a little bit in each of these 5 students so they can grow. Well, Powell and Chapman said that actually was not the key sticky factor, was the size of the group they were in, their ratio to adults. It was flipped the opposite way. They said for a kid to have sticky faith, every one kid needs to have 5 adults who have invested in them over the years. And those could be parents. Those could be grandparents if they're local and influencing them in the right way. They could be a student ministry leader, a small group leader, somebody that they serve with, their parents, friends, an aunt or an uncle. It could be all different kinds of things, but they need to have at least 5 people who cared about them and were influencing them spiritually, and then their faith was much more likely to be sticky. All right, the 4th factor is, are they valued in the church? Not just set aside and spoon-fed, but do their gifts matter? Are they allowed to serve? Can they develop in their gifts in such a way that they feel like if they leave, they're going to be missed because their contribution was significant? Are they valued in the church? And then the 5th factor is connecting with younger kids. That people who were in their student years connecting with younger kids tended to be more sticky in their faith. Now, these aren't all of the factors. These are some of the key factors that are important for our conversation here today. Because it makes us ask some tough questions about our style of doing ministry. How are we creating young disciples? Are we training them to follow Jesus for a lifetime of service and love, and not just teaching them the gospel of sin management so they won't screw up too bad before they graduate from high school? Our dream is to make lifelong disciples of Jesus. And so we went through, and our student ministry staff did a fantastic job of looking at all different potential paradigms that could be out there for doing student ministry and saying, what is the paradigm that will most help us to be able to develop great faith in our students, reach out to a lost world, and make that faith sticky for the rest of their lives? Now, it's not that the old paradigm was bad. We've got a very good student ministry with outstanding staff, great volunteers, people who do amazing things with our students, including my kids, who have benefited greatly from the ministry that we have. But there are a few difficulties that are going on right now. For example, you may know that our student ministry meets at 9 a.m. on Sundays, and 9 a.m. is not a student's optimal time for engagement and energy. 9 a.m., in fact, is the worst time to be inviting a friend. I mean, what 17-year-old wants to wake up early on their sleep-in day if they're not even a follower of Jesus yet? Truth is, our student ministry has been plateaued for years, just been rolling at the same numbers. And this year, we only had 30 visitors on a Sunday morning for the entire year, 30 first-time visitors. Further, the number of students who are moving from the student center at 9 o'clock into the worship center at 10:45 and worshiping with adults is in decline. And it's getting lower every single year. And as we watched these numbers, we thought, the siloing of students is one of the biggest reasons that they don't feel at home in a college church. They go to a new church in a new city with new people, a new paradigm, and they're much less likely to feel comfortable in that kind of an environment if they've never been in it before. Not only that, but they have not seen adults model the worship experience with them side by side. And so siloed students tend to drop out a lot more. So here's the new paradigm. We're going to take the best of our student ministry experience from both 9 o'clock in the morning and from what we're doing in our evenings with our house groups and journey groups and combine it into one massive experience on a Sunday night from 6 to 8 p.m. There will be large group teaching, there will be singing, and there will be mid-size events, and there will be small groups all combined into one great, cool opportunity for them to be able to grow in their faith and bring their friends in a significant way. And the good news is that the whole thing happens while students are awake. So what does Sunday morning look like for students is the next important question. What does it look like for them? Well, one is that we're hoping that students will be worshiping every Sunday morning in Access and in the worship center with their parents, with their friends. These services are already a great place for students to be able to come and grow and learn and move forward in their faith. So it'll be a great opportunity for them to grow as they head into the future. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we want to see students integrated in serving all over the church on Sunday mornings. Student greeters, student camera operators, student worship team members, student tech volunteers, student kids ministry workers. I want you to imagine 100 students deployed all over the church serving in a variety of different ways. And the truth of the matter is, students can do nearly all of these jobs just as well as the adults can. You know, you think about coming into a front door. I love having a student be the person who hands me the program and shows me to my seat. I love having students being the one who serves me coffee. I love having students working the cameras. I love seeing students on stage leading the worship time. I love having students in our kids ministry. In fact, you know that the little kids think that the older kids are total heroes. And sometimes they think the adults are geeks. No, that's not always true. But they love having students in there. They're great role models for the kids, and it makes the students' faith more sticky as well. I mean, I want to be greeted by young kids. I want to be led by young kids. The Bible says that one generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. So here's where you come into play. Here's the all skate part of this. I want to ask everybody to do two things. Somebody say everybody. I want to ask everybody to do two things. Number one is, you know, when you look in the Bible, you see that there are mentors that take place. There's ministry and leadership that gets passed on from one generation to the next generation. So let me ask you a question we'll just do a little Bible quiz here. If I'm going to say who the first leader was, you say who they handed their ministry off to, okay? So the leadership ministry of Moses was handed off to... Oh, good. That's a good Bible quiz. Yeah, Moses led off to Joshua. Elijah handed his ministry off to Elisha. Yeah. David handed his ministry off to... Yeah, I heard someone in the last hour say Goliath. Oh, no, wrong Bible story there. Good try. Wrong Bible story. Yeah, you had Jesus and the disciples. You've got Paul handing it off to Timothy and other people like that. Each person who succeeded in their ministry handoff saw their ministry last for generations afterwards. But people who did not influence the next generation well saw their ministry die in their own generation. So we want to be like those who are handing off the ministry well. So when you see a student that's coming into the worship center, I want to ask everybody to greet one student per week, okay? That's it. Just say hi to one student per week. If they're sitting close to you in the worship center, we have our turn and greet time, target a student. And then go shake hands with them, find out what their name is, and then talk to that kid week after week. Find out what school they go to, what's going on in their life, what they did last weekend, and become a part of their Sunday morning experience. So that's number one. Second thing that I want to invite you to do is that when a student joins your serving team, that you would celebrate that. You would say, oh, we so want to be able to make room for you. And you make sure that they have opportunities to serve. You push them to the front whenever they can to be able to do their serving roles. You let them explore their gifts as somebody who is a mentor trying to help the next generation move into a role that will be significant to them. So two things, greet a student a week, and when you're on a serving team, welcome that student and help them to be able to thrive in that role. Are you guys in for that? If you're in, say, I'm in. This is the way that we can work together to help assure the next generation moves forward. Not just for this generation, but the next generation, and the next generation to the fourth generation. It's an interesting principle that you see in the Bible. Even Paul was following this as he was handing things off to Timothy. He wrote a book, 2 Timothy, at the very end of his life, and he was concerned about where his legacy was going, how he was handing things over to Timothy. The very last book that he wrote, he says this in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, says, "And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others." You see Paul using the fourth generation principle here. He's got 4 generations in here. He's got me, Paul. He's got you, Timothy. He's got the reliable people that Timothy is passing things off to, and then the others who are beyond them Paul is thinking through to the 4th generation. And we need to have that same kind of mindset as we consider how we're investing our lives, the one life that we have, the one church that God has given us, and the future that's been entrusted to us here. Now, I want to take this moment and invite our students to come back up onto the stage to lead us in our last couple of songs. And as they come up, I want you to look around in your pews or in your seats if you're in access, and you should find some 3x5 cards that are there. This is an opportunity for you to write down a prayer that a kid will pray for you. I don't know if you know this, but every week in our kids' ministry, kids write down the prayers that they have for God. And certain prayer teams will pick up those cards, they'll read them, and they'll pray over whatever the kids' prayer requests are, whatever they're praying for. And outside, as you leave today, there will be 2 little buckets. One says, take a prayer, and one says, leave a prayer. And so I'm inviting you to write down what prayer you want some kid to be praying for you, and we'll get those cards to the kids next week, and then take out of the bucket one of those that says, take a prayer. You take a prayer for a kid. You won't know their name, but you can pray for that kid all week in the prayers that they get. And I think that God has a special place for the prayers of children, don't you? Is a special place. So if you've got a prayer request, pass it on to a kid, and you're actually getting an upgrade in your prayer life by having a kid pray for you. So as you do that, these kids are going to lead us here in singing. Kids, you ready to lead us in singing? Yeah! All right, let me hand things off. Go ahead and write down on your cards as they sing.